Singapore, a city-state in Southeast Asia, the center of innovations and one of the most advanced countries. The nominal GDP per capita is the 7th on the planet. But even half a century ago, Singapore was considered a third world country. How did this Asian tiger jump to the top of advanced economies? What is the secret of Singapore's transformation? What contribution does digitalization make to it? Is it possible to apply the experience of this mini-state in Russia?
I would really want to attribute this to the engineering spirit and the experience of the current government.
So now the technology policy making is not just focusing on what's the best technology we can implement, but what technology is right to meet our citizens' needs.
The economies that are able to create the skilled work or to produce the skilled workers, have the labor force that can take advantage of these technological advances will be those that are well placed to thrive in this new digital economy.
By historical standards, Singapore is a young state. It appeared on the world map in 1965. Looking at these futuristic skyscrapers, it is hard to believe that only 55 years ago, there was a former colony with a backward economy and no minerals. The father of the nation, Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, recalled, "There is nothing that Singapore gets for free. We even had to pay for water." Indeed, fresh water was exported here from neighboring Malaysia.
The country had nothing. It was surrounded by completely unfriendly neighbors at that time. Both Malaysia and Indonesia cannot be named great friends. Therefore, there was a desire to survive. Then this principle was transformed into working proactively.
Another slogan of Lee Kuan Yew said, "For surviving, Singapore must be an extraordinary state. If we are ordinary, we simply will not exist." These words were said at the time when the only resource that Singapore had was a port. There was no education system in the country. The island's population was choking on bureaucracy and corruption.
So I think what is important here is in the early stages of Singapore, there was a lot of things that were done by the founder. In this particular case, a very important man called Lee Kuan Yew. And he established good rule of law, an efficient government, a very forward-thinking government, and primarily a level of incorruptibility. He ensured that that was his primary focus in the initial stages.
In the case of Singapore, we've dealt with this petty bureaucratic corruption, police, civil servants, by raising salaries, having tough prosecution, swift investigation, sure prosecution, whistleblowing.
Lee Kuan Yew was combating corruption very seriously indeed. Someone was jailed, someone was forced to emigrate. The fines were huge. Moreover, it is everywhere around. There is an English phrase, Singapore is a fine city. On the one hand, it is a pleasant, beautiful city. On the other hand, it is a city of fines. At the same time, they teach from school that it is not good to take bribes, and it is also bad to give bribes. Therefore, the attitude to this is inculcated since childhood.
In Singapore, respecting the law is taught since the schoolyard. Purity of thoughts is supported by draconian penalties, even at the household level. For example, smoking in the wrong place costs 200 Singapore dollars. Drunk driving is 1,000. Sale of alcohol at night is 1,000 as well. And all this for the first time. All penalties here are progressive, and the law is equal for everyone.
The rule of law and the introduction of the rules according to which society and people had to interact with each other made it possible to transform a multicultural society of Singapore, at that time consisting of the Malaysians, Hindus, Chinese, who did not get along, into a harmonious social society.
Today, Singapore stays on top of international rankings for the lowest level of corruption. Of course, all this did not happen immediately, but systematic efforts have borne fruit. They, in fact, unified the nation, and a strong legal system has provided an attractive environment for international business. In the 90s of the last century, the whole world started talking about the Singaporean economic miracle.
Generally speaking, Singapore is a financial hub, first of all a tourist hub. But not everyone knows, for example, that more than 20% of the world's semiconductors production is concentrated in Singapore. 70% of devices that produce micro-soldering, micro-welding of contacts, microcircuits are also made in Singapore. Singapore is the only country outside the UK where Rolls-Royce assembles the latest civil aircraft's engines.
Singapore has relied on technological production. For this mini-state, electronics has become a pass to the 4 Asian tigers. Together with Taiwan, Hong Kong, and South Korea, Singapore has demonstrated fantastic economic growth and its citizens' welfare gains.
The founder, and he understood the importance of a technocratic sort of state, where technology, science, and forward thinking was important. That's the early stages towards digitizing an economy. So what we rely on heavily is the knowledge-based economy.
The knowledge economy is a key factor in the development of Singapore. Here, they have never been shy about learning from others. One of the authors of The Economic Miracle, the First Minister of Finance, Goh Keng Swee, stated, "It does not matter what problem the country faces, someone somewhere has already solved it."
For instance, the ranking system that we have for civil servants, that is the practice that we pick up from General Electric. The potential ranking is a concept that we pick up from Shell, the oil company. In terms of government, for instance, the police system that we have now is something that we adapt from the Japanese system. So we constantly look out for things that we think can be applicable in Singapore.
In other words, this is one of the most pragmatic countries in the world. For example, in 1961, the government signed a 100-year agreement with Malaysia on fresh water. Nevertheless, almost immediately, natural reservoirs and seawater desalination plants began to be created in Singapore. All this ensured the country's independence.
As a matter of fact, the country does not have any great secrets. Tasks are set, they are fulfilled. The country moves on.
Constantly look to the future, set ambitious goals, and pursue them. This is a Singaporean-style management recipe. The city-state's impressive progress is due to its visionary leadership. Just one fact: in modern Singapore, 23 roadmaps have been adopted. They cover 80% of the sectors of the economy. The cross-cutting theme in each of them is digitalization.
Digitalization is the transfer of business processes to digital, with rangering of organizations. For example, with a consolidation of those functions that were previously scattered. For example, transferring accounting functions or personal management functions into a single service center.
Unlike Russia, Singapore got on the IT technology rails quite early. The first digital agency, the National Computer Council, appeared here in the days of the USSR. Already in the early 80s, the Singapore authorities began to think about the general computerization of the country.
Yeah, see, I think it's about the historical elements. We are a young nation if you compare to the amount of years of Russia in the olden days, So up to now, there is a lot of legacy, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of regime change, there's a lot of ramifications coming out of that. Since the breakup of the USSR, the catalyst was coming from good leadership, actually, through programs. It was heavily invested. In as early as 2000, the year 2000, we were already working on e-government planning.
In 2000, 90% of the territory of Singapore was covered by high-speed internet. Almost all government agencies were connected to it. But creating infrastructure and conditions is one thing, and making people use new opportunities is another.
Let me tell you a story. Years ago, when the government first came up with the digital so-called email system and then the digital stuff, so we want to encourage civil servants to use the email system. But as you say, there's always this mindset. So I prefer to write on papers and all that. So very few actually use it. But fortunately, the then Minister for Trade and Industry, who's now our Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong, he's very technology savvy. So he will send out his stuff in email form. And because the minister sends you something in email form, you have to respond. You cannot just sit there and say, no, I send you a paper form and in file, you know. So yes, it is not an easy way to get people to change.
I talked to a colleague who was an IT director of a large American city for several years. He introduced a service that allowed it to take a photo of a hole in the road with a mobile phone and to send the information to the municipality. The most surprising thing for me was that colleagues of the government agencies told him, "Jonathan, this is not accepted here. We don't do that." After that, I realized that this phenomenon is never only Russian.
Practice has shown that in the process of digitalization, all states face similar problems. In 2020, Russia celebrates a landmark anniversary. Exactly 10 years ago, the first 20 online state services appeared on the information portal Gosuslugi.
Let's remember the situation 15 years ago. Going to certain departments to receive services, for example, to replace a foreign passport, was impossible without Validol. Therefore, the Centers for Public Services and the Portal of Public Services have been a serious breakthrough step forward, and it's absolutely necessary to pay tribute to those who created this.
Today, more than 100 million Russians are registered on Gosuslugi. They have over 200 different references, licenses, and services at their disposal. By 2025, 80% of public services in our country should be available in electronic format.
Designing, piloting, and implementation take time. Let me give you one example. I recently changed my passport. I signed up for Gosuslugi. I did everything in a set digital process. I came to get my passport. When I came up to the window and saw my new passport, they said to me, "Have you brought the old one?" I replied, "Who warned me?"
So, it is not enough to create a convenient digital platform that saves time and nerves of people. For maximum effect, it is necessary to provide all the nuances associated with its use.
If you decide that digital transformation is an important part of where the future is heading, of course you need to transform the organizations that are going to provide that level of change. They need to be able to think through different levels of methodology, such as design thinking, that support a different way of framing how they understand people's needs. Without that level of thinking going on in the first place, technology doesn't become the enabler that will support the things that I think you're looking to achieve with digital transformation.
How to optimize traditional approaches of civil services. How to meet all the people's needs. Managing Director of IDEO, Peter Overy, has been based in Singapore for 10 years. He is a leading expert in engineering, or so-called design thinking.
What design thinking allows civil servants to have is a new tool to look out into the world and actually really fundamentally understand what citizens are doing and why they are doing it. Is to start asking questions of the things that instinctually those leaders know to be things that need solving or that are problems that need changing.
Basically, you should not rely on your own ideas. It is necessary to build objective metrics. It is necessary to elaborate a feedback collection system, analytics system. We recently had an example of such an analysis to replace a driver license. The participants of the discussion, after 2 hours of analysis, were surprised to realize that this process, which seemed linear, intelligible and absolutely transparent for citizens, turns out to be hurdles.
The main goal of the new practice is to go beyond stereotypes and habitual ways of solving problems. Its main tools are empathy, feedback, prototyping, and testing. You will agree that it's like creating a new product in business. It was from there that design thinking came to the world of government.
But what we do have is great benchmarks from the world of startups. Like, how are these huge unicorns able to take something that was worth zero and suddenly become worth millions and trillions of dollars? Well, it's because they're able to use processes and ways of thinking that support a very adaptive, quick learn by getting feedback, constructing that feedback in a new way, delivering the tools and the technology that support the growth and scaling of the solution that they're trying to provide. Government have to do the same thing.
Peter Overy regularly consults government agencies. In his opinion, even in advanced Singapore, they are just learning to use a new analysis tool and to ask the right questions.
We have polling center where we do calls to representative sets of people living in Singapore about what they think about different issues. And the other set of data that we collect are sometimes big data surveys that we have. I think the key to understanding citizens is the triangulation of data. We try to triangulate that to understand what people are actually thinking on the ground to then implement our government policies in a better manner.
Is that your service to the public must continue to improve and do better for the public. So if I digitalize for the sake of digitalize, that's wrong. But if I digitalize because I can offer a better service to the public, I think we would have succeeded, and I think we've done quite well. Secondly, we have to make sure that we have enough people within government to do this digitalization, because at the end of the day, it requires skills.
Of course, Singapore cannot show off such human resources as Russia. Our population is simply incomparable. Since the establishment of the state, this island has faced a shortage of specialists in all fields. Singapore compensated for the shortage of personnel with a well-thought-out education policy.
And we have gone through several iterations and transformations in line with the rapid changing economic structure of Singapore. So what we had in 1965, 1975, 85, 95, and 2005 and 2015 are all different, because the education system has changed and adapts itself. What social background you come from, regardless of what economic background you come from, the idea is that you will be able to maximize your capacity according to your interests, attitudes, and aptitudes. So as long as you're willing to work hard, as long as you're willing to work smart, you will be able to rise to your maximum capacity.
Modern Singapore has developed a clear system for recruiting talented candidates for the corridors of power. As a rule, it starts at local universities.
And also we do give out a lot of scholarships to young promising students in secondary schools for them to study in universities. So when they graduate, they work for the government for a number of years. We give them challenging jobs, opportunities to do different types of jobs, look at different functions, and we also provide training opportunities for them to upgrade their skills.
Singapore civil servants are required to upgrade their qualifications. Most of them undergo government and business administration programs. These efforts are well paid.
Money is a very good motivator, so we pay the market rate, and we adopt private company practice as well. So we do not have fixed increments for public officers nowadays. How much you get in terms of the salary, in terms of the increment, depends on how well you do your job. We also pay performance bonus, possibly theoretically up to 6 months of your salary. And also there is no security of tenure in the Singapore public service. Every year we do have people who leave the service because they do not do as good a job as the colleagues.
Singapore has a system in which the salaries of ministries are tied to the salaries of business leaders in several sectors. That means that there is a system of how it is to be done. Accordingly, the salaries of lower-level officials depends on the salaries of higher-level officials.
Thanks to this approach, Singaporean technocracy can indeed compete with business in the labor market. The global digitalization of such a huge country as Russia is an ambitious and mega difficult task. It has no ceiling of possibilities. This attracts many business captains to the ranks of civil servants. There is another reason for motivation. The progress of an individual company increases its income. But the digitalization of the state changes life around for the better.
If we take the example of the accounts chamber, for example, a number of industries and services, colleagues with whom I meet, they have mixed previous experience, private and state. Moreover, there are those who have already made the transition from private to public and back again.
The Accounts Chamber is one of the flagships of digitalization in Russia. In 2018, this department turned into a platform for the introduction of digital technologies, which have already brought tangible results.
In complex systems, the process never occurs at the same speed. There are always leading departments that are moving forward. We can mention the Accounts Chamber, which does not seriously change its process of work with the use of digital tools. From the manual work of inspectors, manual data checking, they are moving to collecting data and increasingly to more and more automated analytics.
The scale of our country and the corresponding state apparatus do not allow evenly carrying out the digital evolution of government bodies. At the same time, there are several departments in Russia whose successes in digitalization are at the level of world standards. We will talk about one of them a little later. In the meantime, let's go back to Asia. Singapore spends billions of dollars on education. The government strives to attract the best of the best to the management ranks.
Actually, the talent available to it indigenously is quite small. Think about that. We only have 35,000 to 40,000 babies a year. So that's a very small number for a country. So we have to maximize that limited number of people into a global workforce.
The idea is to increase the number as much as possible. As I mentioned earlier, we need people who understand robotics and AI, or artificial intelligence and AI, or IoT and AI. But we are now seeing a pipeline of students coming in, but we need to ramp up their capability and their experience as fast as possible.
This is the so-called R&D Center on the territory of Nanyang Technological University. In large companies, these units are responsible for the future. They build technology strategies and conduct research and development. The Russian firm Sportmaster opened its center in Singapore in 2015.
In terms of the number of R&D centers and laboratories that Nanyang Technological University has, perhaps it is one of the 5 best universities that work with enterprises. Therefore, even from an academic point of view, you see that there is a good base in material science, then good experience and support from the state and from the university. It was already enough to try to organize the R&D structure here.
The Singapore government dates this interaction with foreign companies. The university provides them with a scientific base and premises, and in return, it gets access to modern equipment and advanced research.
We use artificial intelligence to optimize the composition of insulation. We use 3D simulation and computer running simulation to design running shoes. Thus, we optimize the prototyping process, and receiving a sufficiently large amount of data, we analyze it and this services as real feedback for designers in order to understand what changes need to be made to the model to improve quality.
As a result, instead of academic laboratories, students find themselves at the forefront of real business innovations. These educational programs and open-door policy are key to Singapore's competitiveness in the new technologies world.
Singapore government has started it by, educating our young to think, of what the world should be like tomorrow. And we really have to stay competitive by dreaming on and dreaming big. We have to, continuously look for the next innovation that is going to potentially help disrupt an existing market.
Singapore is not called the Silicon Valley of Asia for nothing. Experts note the ease of doing business, the flexibility of the labor market, the low level of corruption, and the development of high technologies. This attracts investment and digital industry leaders who are targeting the Asia-Pacific markets.
As a country, to show thought leadership in technology, the laws that we have placed here, which a lot of countries and organizations trust upon us, is the level of stability. So that took time and traction, and after a long while, people trust on its stability. As a country that you don't have regime change, we don't have any sanctions, we don't have issues when it comes to ensuring the speed of certain legislation takes place in accordance to the critical needs.
Several government agencies are involved in the adaptation of foreign business in Singapore. The meetings with their representatives pleasantly surprised the top managers of the Russian company, Group IB.
The organization is called Enterprise Singapore. We had a question. I don't remember what exactly we needed, but some question. A gentleman, extremely competent, answers it completely and then says, "Well, actually, this question is not to be addressed to Enterprise Singapore. It's relevant for another organization. Therefore, if you need more details, please refer there." We asked, "Why did you answer them? Why do you know everything?" And he said, "Guys, here in Singapore we have no wrong door policy. That is a policy where there is no wrong door."
IB Group specializes in cybersecurity. Their Singapore office opened in 2019.
An analog of Russian public services portal Gosuslugi, here is SingPass. My acquaintance with this service began quite interestingly. To receive SingPass, you need to come to the service center. I was ready to spend half an hour or an hour there. 45 seconds from the moment when you open the door to the service center until the moment when you can remotely, using your phone, get any service related to the state in this country.
The household sphere is no exception. Fei Jinghe, senior analyst at IB Group, came to Singapore from China. He still does not know where the utility meters are located in his apartment.
First of all, there is no physical person knocking on my door saying, "Hey, sir, can I come in and read the meters?" Instead, all these readings are done remotely. And in terms of payment, I can arrange a periodical deduction with my online banking system. So in total, there's no human effort required and everything is automated.
Most of all, in this respect, I like this element of gamification. Every month of electricity, water and gas company compares me with other inhabitants of my house in similar apartments. And I know the average consumption. I know how much 50 families consume, and I see myself against this background.
But such a simple service as internet connection at work made the director of the representative office sadly remember Moscow.
So it is a puzzle. How long should it take to connect a company to the same company that has been providing internet here for several years in Singapore? There is its wire hanging there and all the equipment. The answer is amazing. I need 30 calendar days for the internet to appear in the wire that hangs in my server room with the operator's inscription.
Experience the difference. In Russia, this issue would be resolved in a couple of days. Moreover, some domestic companies objectively outperform Singaporean companies in terms of the quality of digital services.
What other services in Moscow were much more fun for me to consume? These are banks. If I go to the store and buy a bottle of milk with a card, I will not see the transaction in any bank in Singapore or in any application of this bank for the next 2 days. It does not exist. In many banks, I won't even receive a text message. And I want to say that if Tinkoff comes to Singapore and miraculously gets a banking license, all local banks will be in trouble.
The banking sector, with its popular mobile applications and remote transactions, is a bright sign of digital Russia. In particular, thanks to such technologies, our country rises annually in international innovation ratings. Russia also has its own leaders in the field of public administration. Along with the Accounts Chamber, the Federal Tax Service claims the title of the smartest department.
It's all started with such a driving force as the need of citizens and for organizations to contact less with tax inspection. That means that electronic reporting is needed. Online invoices and online cash registers reduce this need of contacting even more. Relatively speaking, the organization works, the organization conducts business, and the course of accounting for this very activity, the information goes to the tax office, and for a number of large organizations, the tax office gets direct access for credentials. The principle of transparency is used instead of a lack of accountability.
The Federal Tax Service of Russia is increasingly becoming an invisible organization. But what is more important is its efficient data collection systems that bring us closer to the next stage of digitalization, the so-called digital transformation.
Digital transformation. It can be referred to the internal processes of government. It happens against the background of the fact that we have and we accumulate ever increasing amounts of data, and we can make decisions based on these amounts of data. Data from various ministries, departments and services have become linked. We are talking about data lakes, we are talking about fundamentally different instruments, both for the implementation of public administration and control and supervisory functions.
Big data is the oil of digital transformation. On their basis, artificial intelligence algorithms are looking for patterns inaccessible to the human mind. Information processing occurs at a fantastic speed. Where it used to take years, analysis can take just a few seconds. This saves time, human resources, and allows you to take a fresh look at solving urgent problems.
For example, in the transportation area, the data can be as detailed as when you flip your traffic MRT card. It will record in which station it gets in and which station it gets out. And couple this with the big data analysis, the government will actually think about the good policies to encourage people to travel at a different time period instead of just doing at the same time. Imagine 6 million of people just want to travel to their office at the same time. It will be a very hectic situation.
The capital of Russia, as well as Singapore, is a metropolis with a high population density. According to various estimates, it ranges from 5,000 to 8,000 people per square kilometer. Optimization of congested urban systems, for example, transport systems, is relevant both for Moscow and Singapore. The history of exchange of experience between the two megacities has been going on for 15 years.
Moscow started to arrive in Singapore in 2005. We began to look at what they have here and think how we can apply it. We have taken a lot from the services that are available in Singapore, but in some fees we had already gone ahead earlier. For example, our Moscow parking system had been introduced much earlier than in Singapore. Another question is that the Singaporeans looked at what we had, and 2 years ago, and if I'm not mistaken, they also implemented it, but they did it better.
The road network covers about 12% of Singapore. This is a high figure. For comparison, the housing stock of this densely populated island is about 14%. Fighting traffic jams here is task number one. Recently, a compact device has appeared in all Singapore cars. It is tied to the bank account of the car owner.
This box is a universal authorization tool at all car parks in the country. It's all remote. One drives up, everything is counted automatically. The barrier opens, the money starts to accumulate. The same goes for toll road access. This is a universal tool that goes across the whole country.
By means of the same device, fines for traffic violations are automatically charged. Respecting the traffic rules is controlled by an army of smart cameras with artificial intelligence. The emergence of such end-to-end technologies is the result of the Smart Nation program launched in Singapore in 2014.
Well, the Smart Nation project is really an umbrella project that brings together many other innovations already happening in Singapore in many, many years. The Smart Nation really is a deployment of these various digital technologies to make life simpler, more convenient, more efficient, less use of manpower by the government, and basically just, move Singapore up the digital ladder.
The main goal of the Smart Nation project is to create a unique ecosystem. It should unite the three pillars of digital transformation: digital economy, digital state, and digital society.
The digital economy and digital society, as well as the digital state, cannot exist without integration and data exchange. You need to understand that the digital society is in many ways related to big data analysis and the Internet of Things, because what everything about the creation of Smart Nation is based on relationship, on medicine, on the relations with the state, on the movements of citizens, and on making the infrastructure for citizens' life as comfortable as possible.
So the first phase of the Smart Nation project rightly was infrastructure. So we needed to build infrastructure to be able to position Singapore to be a smart nation. So that was phase one. We are sort of past phase one now. Once the sort of data pipes and the data architecture and systems are up, we have new apps, new unified apps like Moments of Life that I shared earlier, where you unify different services, registering for birth instead of a parent like myself going to different government agencies to do the registration. Now everything can be done on my mobile app.
Application Moments of Life is a digital novelty in the field of public services. It is designed for parents with children under 6 and retirees over 60. On one platform, we have tried to implement specific life scenarios that these categories of citizens may face. For example, the birth of a child.
I have 3 kids. So in 2015, when in early 2000s, when my kid was born, at that time when my kid was born, I have to do manual registration of different websites to register. I need to go to the counter to register the name to get a birth certificate. I have to go on another website to register for subsidies. So the Singapore government found that that's not seamless and created a one-stop mobile app that does all this registration together.
In the traditional mode, this data was scattered across several departments, across several services. The next step task in the statute digital transition is bring data together, giving the opportunity to manage and to make decisions based on this accurate data about citizens, families, and to provide social support.
As for retirees, Singapore is doing a lot to prevent older people from falling out of the digitalization process. The state provides them with free internet access, provides them with smartphones, and pays for training in computer courses.
So a lot of seniors in Singapore, the older people in Singapore, have been started to go for all these classes to learn about digital technologies, how to use a smartphone, how to develop apps. For young people, it's not an issue because they are continuously using their tablets and their smartphone. But for people in their 50s and 60s and 70s, this is something they have to learn to use if they're not going to be left out of the economy.
They will need this knowledge in order to use the more than 300 mobile applications and 1,600 online services for everyday life. Now, 90% of transactions of the population with the state are already carried out with the personal presence of citizens.
In my mind, we are now phase 2, where citizens actually see the benefits of a smart nation, and it has to be done sequentially. So the next phase of the Smart Nation will be anticipating these different pain points or things that are taking very long, unify them into one app.
Of course, on the way to this fantastic goal, Singapore will face many serious problems. The central issue is information protection. The more confidential data government agencies accumulate, the more often financial transactions are carried out online, the higher the likelihood of leakage. However, Russia is now facing the same difficulties.
Imagine that we are digitizing the registration of transactions that are legally serious for a citizen, buying and selling an apartment or formalizing inheritance. Let us agree that the risks are very serious for a citizen. Let us say the plan is lost. Let us imagine a property loss scenario or an inheritance loss scenario. Therefore, the introduction of these new processes must be approached with extreme seriousness and thoughtfulness.
By the way, these online legal services are already functioning in Singapore. Therefore, we ask the participants of our film to answer an important question. Can the experience of this mini-state be used in the digital transformation of Russia?
So Russia is in a fine position, at least from the ability, in terms of scale, to take advantage of these technologies. Second, Russia also has the capacity and the capabilities to seize the most out of these digital technologies. Russia is traditionally strong in the STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering and math.
Got a lot of brilliant people in Russia with a lot of ideas. How are they going to get funded to get subsidized towards building new products, new innovative technology that can help find a way through to have accelerators? How do we accelerate this? In accordance with the government program, in accordance to ensuring the educational programs are being met, with a lot of solidity.
I would caution that sometimes best practices may not be best for you. What is important is to distill lessons from those best practices and apply those lessons to you, because every culture and every context, the Russian culture and context is very different. So we cannot implement best practices wholesale because it may not be best for you.
Permission is key. And what I mean by that, just telling people to do it is not enough. You need to be able to support them with the right types of behaviors, so as they go through the process of change and they start to unlock new answers.
I would not think about digital technologies. I would think of the value that Singapore has adopted for itself, a happy nation. Quite often, in the interaction of citizens and the state, we act as if there is some kind of insoluble conflict between us. Like if we were entrenched and there is enemies everywhere around. And if you agree, if you find advantages, if, in terms of same design thinking, you are trying to find a point of comfort, we may not speak directly, but we will creatively re-elaborate and apply this very happy nation to ourselves. And digital technologies will help with this. They are a tool.
The example of Singapore is a great motivator for those who strive for the future. Digital transformation brings incredible opportunities to state and society. We entered the digitalization path later than others. In a short period of time, our country has achieved excellent results. Today, Russia has the will and resources to create its own unique ecosystem where a smart and happy nation is going to live and work.